Welcome to this episode of the K8 for Wellness podcast. I'm your host, Kate, and today we have a very special guest with us, Brett Lloyd. How you doing, Brett?
Very well, Kate. It's a real pleasure to be here to speak with you and your audience.
Oh, it's a pleasure to have you here and to be the first person to do my YouTube video. I mean, you're pretty brave.
We're going to have a good time, and together
Yes,
we're going to put some good out into the world.
We sure are. And where are you calling from today?
Jacksonville, Florida.
Yay, you're in the nice heat down there. We're getting it up here in New Hampshire too. So
I would really rather at this time of year be where you are than where I am.
Yeah, you guys, well, we have very high humidity. We're at like 93% humidity. And how much you guys probably get up to that point?
It's ridiculous all the time. I don't even pay attention. I'm actually, we talked about being fat adapted. I'm Florida adapted. I've been here 10 years now. I'm really used to it. It's annoying sometimes, but one of the cool things about Carnivore is I'm, for years I was afraid to be out in the sun because of meds and whatnot.
Yeah.
And now being out in the sun's wonderful.
Yeah.
No sunburn to speak of. I can work outside with no shirt on for 8 hours and be just fine.
Isn't that great? Before we dive into the topic today, because I'm really excited to get into a lot of this stuff with you, because I know you have a lot of good information to share, and I know you're going to help a lot of people out there. Before we dive into that, what is new and exciting with you?
New and exciting with me is actually started yesterday. After about a year's layoff, I'm a musician, and I'd been away from music for quite a while after my mental illness symptoms departed. It's like my old muse died with my symptoms, and I recently have grown a new muse and am writing songs again. And a dear friend of mine, we have a project called Dark Hearts Blues. And we actually recorded some vocal tracks yesterday for the first time in a long time. So I'm very excited about that.
That is so cool. And is this the same people that you were recording with before all of this, before you took a hiatus?
Yeah, well, this lady it's just the two of us. I've got a music studio, and I program things that I can't play, and I play the rest of it. And, we write it all. I write all the music, and we share lyric responsibilities. And she's got an amazing Janis Joplin, Grace Slick kind of combination. She's a wailer. And so we do some slow rock and blues and some other things. And it's a wonderful life. She plays a significant role in my wellness story, though, as we'll get to.
Oh, good. Then we definitely can dive into that. But before we do, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do?
I'm a 59-year-old happily married Catholic convert who's a guitar player. I played in bars and clubs for over 20 years until my mental illness got to be too severe for me. Nobody wanted to work with the crazy man anymore. Prior to that, I worked in the mental health field.
Oh, wow.
Surprisingly, surprisingly, however you want to look at it, for many years, and was unaware that I was ill, and literally depressioned myself out of that field of work as well, thankfully. Somebody with mental illness should not be trying to perform therapy on somebody who needs it. I grew up in a typical textbook standard American diet home. Mom and Dad had this enormous vegetable garden. We had fresh vegetables every day, either picked or they canned them. Tons of meat. I was an athlete, a committed athlete. This is living the life. My sister was a committed athlete in her own way. My dad had been a jock for many years. He was the one tilling the garden, doing all the labor after working all day at his, on his feet job in a plant. We thought we were living the life. Out of the four of us, my dad passed away in April of this year from end-stage renal disease after 20 plus years of type 2 diabetes that no physician at any time ever told him was reversible. My sister suffered from ulcerative colitis. She still deals with IBS. She has to be very careful about what she eats, or she's literally chained to her bathroom for an indeterminate amount of time. My mom's had a myriad of health problems her whole life, issues with obesity and other things. And I suffered from chronic depression, anxiety, and insomnia for over 40 years.
Wow.
Following the standard American diet to the letter.
Of course.
And looking back now with the benefit of hindsight and clear eyes, I can say with certainty I started experiencing depression symptoms around the age of 15. That's when the sleep disruption started. Okay. And anxiety was a little more present than I was ever even remotely aware of. It's amazing the things that we think are normal that are abnormal as all get out if we just had the right perspective. Yeah. A little bit about how depression manifested itself with me, because it's always specific to the individual.
Absolutely.
I was a very angry, depressed person. I had an extreme dissatisfaction with life, with people. Nothing was good enough. I wasn't good enough. I got a little deluded at times. You know, if I only had this air conditioner remote, Kate, everything in my life would be better. Mm-hmm. And then I would get the lovely remote, and I'd have it for an hour and find 30 things that were wrong with it and why it had failed. Yeah. And all of that anger sat on top of a vast sea or pit of sadness and shadowy darkness that just was horrible.
I can't even begin to imagine.
I wouldn't want you to. The closest I've been able to describe it in a way that people can somehow intellectually get, imagine if you had a 50-pound anvil on your head, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. It was there when you woke up, and it was weighing on you, grinding on you, relentless. No matter what you did, that was having an impact. And knowing that the next day it was going to be there waiting on you.
Yeah.
And over time, it just got worse. I was first diagnosed in 1990. My life became unmanageable due to depression. And they recommended Prozac, which was very expensive at that time. I tried it for a while with some samples, but I wasn't on it long enough to really get a therapeutic benefit from it. And then I kind of coped, and I gave up the mental health career and became a full-time musician, and I'm gigging and paying my dues, and I'm pretty functional, and I work really hard at my craft, and people want me to work with them. So because I was very reliable. I wasn't a drug user. I wasn't a drunk. So, you know, if you can play halfway decent and you're reliable, you can work a lot.
Right.
But fast forward to about 1993, 94, 95, I started having horrible panic attacks.
Now, were you married at this time?
Yes, I was married. Marriage number one, 1988. 1986. Our son was born in 88. Okay. And needless to say, she was dealing with a horror show that she had issues of her own. Then right before she and I divorced and separated, I started having these horrible panic attacks to the point that I called for an ambulance twice because I was almost certain I was having a heart attack the first time. And then after they got there and examined me, we agreed maybe was just anxious. Mm. And then the second time I was terrified. I thought I was having a real heart attack. And they hooked me up to the machine, get to the hospital. You know, they do the nitro under the tongue, the whole 9 yards. And my heart's fine, which is wonderful. Yeah. But what just happened here? Well, why? And, you know, I didn't forget everything I learned when I went to school and when I worked in the field and whatnot. I'm like, this is not good. And I went to a physician, I'm a musician. I have the long hair. I'm not the prettiest thing in the world to look at that time.
You don't have the hair
And
anymore.
no, I'm not suffering from that anymore. But this physician was convinced that I was some kind of junkie or something. He literally made me strip so he could look to verify I didn't have track marks. And I'm just like,
Wow.
no, this is what was happening to me. They said I needed to see a doctor, so I'm seeing you.
Wow.
And so that wasn't a very fun experience. And then about a year and a half after that, right around the time my wife and I split finally, I saw a doctor and he just told me, he said, listen, if you don't go on medication, your life is going to become very uncomfortable. And so late 94, early 95 in that range, I started taking Prozac, which I took for the better part of the next 23 years.
Wow. Do you feel that helped you? Do you feel that it helped at all?
The first 2 or 3 years, it did mitigate some symptoms. I was less prone to angry outbursts and things like that. But what we found over time was I would start having, just out of the blue, an inexplicable mood crash.
Yeah.
Wasn't facilitated by some kind of event or something awful happening, and just out of nowhere, wham. And then began what I called the illness wellness cycle. And the periods of wellness started to decrease. Mm-hmm. The periods of illness started to increase. Fast forward to 2006, 2007, I had a textbook nervous breakdown. There was a familial event I don't get specific about, and I didn't sleep for more than an hour or two a night for 6 to 8 weeks.
And talk about having all of this already going on and then not sleeping and regenerating and doing what your body needs to do, it just exacerbates everything even more. I mean, that must have been like pure hell for 6 weeks.
It was a horror show. And when you go without sleep like that, bad things start to happen to you. And, like you might hear kids playing in the yard when the kids are grown and you're the only one home, kind of thing. And my diagnosis got bumped to major depression with psychotic features as a result of that. They put me on this medication. Finally, it was called Remeron. And Remeron's remarkable because I only took it for a couple, 3 weeks, but I gained like 25 pounds. It's like a notorious weight gaining medication.
Wow.
But after a couple of weeks of blissful sleep, I stopped sleeping again. And I went on another 6-week tear of only 1 to 2 hours. And it started getting really precarious looking. And the doctor started trying different combinations of meds. And he hit upon this medication called Symbyax, which is Prozac combined with a antipsychotic medication whose name I can never remember because I couldn't pronounce it very well. Starts with an A. That stopped the free fall, but I slept 10 to 12 hours a night. And during the day, I would have to take 1 or 2 2-hour naps. Wow. And I was just a medicated pile of flesh.
So think of your quality of life of this. So let's dig into that as a little bit deeper. So what did this do to your relationships? What about, you're saying you had to sleep throughout the day. So obviously you weren't able to work, or were you going off taking little cat naps during the day at work? I mean, let's talk about that.
I was a full-time musician from 1992 through about 2007.
Okay.
And eventually, I was unaware that my mental health was deteriorating for a long time until this breakdown happened.
Okay.
And I look at I was gaining weight. My diet was garbage. I ate what I wanted when I wanted. Meat, a lot of carbs, enormous amounts of bread and potatoes. Was a cereal junkie. Nobody ever hinted to me that I was getting fat. I didn't feel bad physically.
Right.
So I was just, and one of the things with my depression, which I'll get into a little more, I became I was unable to perceive my environment accurately. So there was a lot going on with me I was oblivious to.
Yeah.
Just oblivious to. I basically only saw what the depression wanted me to see.
Absolutely.
And, but the free fall stopped. The quality of life was a nightmare, but I survived that somehow. And by the end of 2008, I'll never forget, I'm like, okay, I can't change what's happened. This is a horrible existence right now. I need to get better, and I've just got to shake this off and get back to living life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I decided I was going to talk myself into wellness, which I kind of did for a little while. But I said to my wife, I was like, I've gained so much weight. This is terrible, and the thought of dieting was just
Yeah.
going hungry and all that just wasn't even remotely appealing to me. And she said, well, I've heard about this Atkins diet. Why don't you look into that? It sounds pretty promising. And in my own demented way, I kind of glanced at it. Okay, I can kick no more potatoes. I can do that. And no more bread. I can do that. And you can eat all the fruit you want. Okay, well, I like bananas and I love grapes and all this other stuff. Okay. So I sort of kind of followed it. Remember, I'm a guitar player with a
Right.
background in psychology. I'm not a nutrition anything.
Right.
But I started losing some weight. I lost about 25 pounds and my mood got better. But at no time did my wife or I attribute the change in mood to the diet.
Right.
We thought, hey, you've come to terms and you're calmer, meds you're taking now. By that time I was on 3 stable for 8 years. I was always on Prozac, Ativan for anxiety, and Trazodone was my go-to-sleep medicine. I woke up with a drug hangover every day for over 8 years.
Wow.
But I was somewhat functional. Started playing, writing, recording, got to go to my 30-year high school reunion. There's pictures of it. And this is funny. My wife and I looked at those pictures not that long ago, and we're like, we were both fat. But at that time, we thought we looked good.
Ah.
And, I had a great time. It was a wonderful time.
Great.
But then, and I wrote a couple albums, faith-based music, and I started performing in churches a little bit there locally in the Southeast. And so things were looking up. But I decided, Kate, in the spring of 2010, I miss ice cream. I miss those big coconut cakes, those 3-layer coconut cakes you could get from Sam's.
Yes.
I miss it. And Kate, if I get heavy again, I can just go back on Atkins.
Yeah.
What's the harm? So that's what I did. Middle of July 2010, I'm at Mass on a Sunday evening, and it's before communion, and we're on our knees praying, and I am hit with this prescient, it wasn't a panic attack, this prescient warning thing telling me in my head, if you don't get out of here right now, something really awful is going to happen. And Mass is very important to me. I try to be the best Catholic I can. So I did something real atypical. It was such a strong feeling. I ran out of that church.
Wow.
And hopped on my motorcycle and was home. And in 15 minutes, I was curled up on my living room couch, bawling like a baby, and had no idea why. And this began the worst of the worst from July of 2010 to January of 2015. We had to move. My wife's job moved. We moved to Jacksonville, Florida, and we don't have any friends, don't have any family, don't know anybody, and I have to go doctor fishing. And I had some really awful experiences with that. Finally found a nurse practitioner who put me on Seroquel, and for a while I thought that might be the answer. But I mean, I had been on combination, every doctor I would see, it was Prozac with Wellbutrin, Prozac with this, Prozac with that. They tried even Lamictal, which is an epilepsy medicine that sometimes they use for bipolar and depression. The same thing would happen. I would feel a little bit better for a while, or I'd just feel really weird, but and then it would just go back to being the way it was before I took that medicine, or worse. With the Seroquel, I had about 8 months where I was fairly stable, very creative, recorded some of the best stuff I'll ever record in my life. It was crazier than you can imagine, though. And then it got even uglier. By the end of 2014, January 2015, my psychiatrist, the last psychiatrist I'll ever have, not named Georgia Ede, told me I should seriously consider electroshock therapy and or a long-term hospitalization.
Wow.
And
How did that make you feel?
Like I was at the end of my rope almost. Yeah. Like there's not much more to see after that, because in my mind, I haven't forgotten my former life working in the field. I know, I was always good about taking my meds. I didn't want to be one of those chronic patients who kept coming back to the hospital or kept whining to his doctor because he wasn't being compliant with his meds, which is notorious.
Absolutely.
Very common. I thought this is, I didn't think I'd live out the year. I really did. And I never actively wanted to end my life, but depression's very insidious. These thoughts would come, well, okay, we're not going to do it, but if we were going to do it, how would we do it?
Yeah.
I don't want to think about that. I got beliefs about as a Catholic, I don't want no part of suicide. No. Well, we're not, but if we were, it was constant going on. It became very difficult to communicate. My wife would say, "Hey, Kate, it's a beautiful morning out there today. It's going to be a great day." But my illness would twist that and nudge it, and never in my favor, to where what I heard with all sincerity was, "Yeah, it's going to be another beautiful day." Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Now, I love my wife. Loved her then, adore her now even more. I was like, "Well, honey, what's wrong?" And she would look at me like, "I just told you it's going to be a beautiful day. What do you mean, what's wrong?" And you could just imagine the conflict that began to occur all the time.
Yeah.
And it ground on both. It was a horrible quality of life. She never knew what to expect out of me. I couldn't make her understand me. She couldn't understand me because I was not making sense.
Right.
And she would try to talk to me as if I were a sane person. Well, that was not productive.
She's a saint.
I've said time and time again, and I'll say it to my last breath, if anybody's earned a place in heaven, it's her for staying with me. Because I was very, very difficult to be around. So this is all happening, and this friend of mine, her name's Kimmy Wade. She's a singer for this project I have called Dark Hearts Blues. I was still writing music, and I was able to record a little, and I put a Craigslist ad in because I had these songs I couldn't sing. I wanted to see if I could find somebody to do the vocals. And she comes, and she's awesome, and so we are managing to create things together, but she's also observing and watching me disintegrate. And finally one day she says, "Have you ever thought about medical marijuana?" I'm like, I was aware of it. As a musician, cannabis had always been around, but I had a bad experience with it when I was young. I didn't fool with it. I'm the guy at rehearsals and during gig breaks, whatever. It comes my way. I was passing left, passing right. Beer was legal. What did I need that for? But I knew about what was going on in the states that had medical marijuana programs a little bit, but so I'm like, okay, I'll look into it. And there was some anecdotal evidence of people having symptom relief. And my wife and I are looking at each other. Well, at this point, what do we have to lose?
Right.
So we secured 4 whole grams of flour. My wife looked up a can of butter recipe. In case she came up with these little cookies, they were about the size of a quarter, little oatmeal raisin cookies. I guess you could say they were keto. They didn't have any sugar in them. And I was so scared of these things. I broke the first one in half and I ate it. And Kate, after like 10 or 15 minutes, I felt like 1,000 suns had lifted off of me.
That's great.
I wasn't high. I just didn't feel like crap anymore for the first time in who knows when. Then about 40 minutes later, the high happened, and I discovered that cannabis did what all those pills I took for all those years couldn't do. It successfully treated all my symptoms. I became instantly calmer. Things that, I would pour enormous amounts of energy in, I could suddenly clearly see there were nothing burgers. What was I doing? Wasting my time on that nonsense.
Right.
But it just treated my symptoms. It didn't cure them.
Correct.
It was just like medicine. My wife comes home the first day, and instead of the big angry ogre, it was the big ogre with a smile on his face. She didn't know how to react. But that became part of my regimen.
Wow.
And 10 days into that, I'm sitting on the side of my bed, putting my shoes on, Kate, and suddenly my belly's in the way. And I'm like, this is like a red alert, straight out of Star Trek. Your belly is in the way. That's not supposed to be there. And I go and I look in the mirror and I see myself accurately for the first time in who knows when. And it's I look like either a stroke or a heart attack waiting to happen.
Jeez.
I'm only 6 foot tall at the time, and I weigh 289 pounds.
Wow.
And I immediately told my wife, Adkins tonight. We start on it tonight. It's got to happen. I recognize immediately I'm at a great risk here. Started walking the dog, a half a block here, a half a block there. Continuing with the cookies, the cannabis cookies. And by the end of 2015, Kate, I was off all the SSRIs, mood stabilizers.
That's awesome.
By the end of 2016, I was off the Ativan, which was really hard to get off.
Now, the only thing that you've changed, I say the only thing, the few things was you went to Atkinson, you controlled what you were eating. You went low carb, exactly. And you are still doing the cannabis at this point, and you're walking the dog. So these are the things that you implemented. Okay.
Exactly.
Awesome.
And by the end of 2017, I was off the insomnia meds.
Wow.
And I walked off 94 pounds of that 289, but I was dependent upon cannabis to be somewhat functional. I was functioning at a higher level, but I was still unemployable. I was, very erratic, but I was a whole lot nicer to be around. So again, this same lady messages me in May of 2018. She's like, oh my gosh, you've got to go watch every video this guy named Dr. Jordan Peterson has ever made. You're going to love him.
He's amazing.
Okay. So I looked him up and naturally found the Jordan Peterson Destroys collection right off the bat.
Great.
And I was like, oh my gosh, where does this guy come from? He's incredible. He made that woman unable to speak with logic. He literally rendered that newscaster unable to talk. I'll never forget that. So it became part of my regimen. 420 time came along. It was time to use some cannabis. Well, it was time to watch a Jordan Peterson video while I was doing it. But in June, I came across this cutout of him on Joe Rogan where he describes how his daughter figured out if she just went beef, salt, and water, her arthritis and horrible depression symptoms, which I was unaware she suffered from, went away. I was unaware that he suffered from chronic depression, which blew my mind that he could function at the level that he does, being mentally ill. That, to me, is even now is mind-boggling.
Yes.
And he suffers from really horrible anxiety, and he experienced enormous symptom relief eating beef, salt, and water. Now, Kate, if this is anybody but Dr. Jordan Peterson, I'm flipping the channel. You know, this is crazy. Nobody ever said a word to me for all the reading I've done. I mean, I was not a passive patient. I mean, I looked up my meds every time they prescribed so I could be aware of side effects. And, you know, if I have to titrate off for whatever reason, this is how you do it. I didn't want to hurt myself. No one said anything about diet. Are you serious? But it's Jordan Peterson, a man I believe has impeccable integrity. So I'm like, okay. And my wife watched the video with me after she got home. Is he really saying what I think? Oh, yeah, he's really saying it. So I start searching. The next video I find is one Dr. Sean Baker on Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
And I'm, again, Air Force combat surgeon. They just don't let anybody do that.
No.
You have got to be an extraordinarily well put together human being to even be considered. Yep. So here again, impeccable integrity. I watched the dietary portion of that episode probably 50 times because I'm thinking there's got to be a flaw in the logic. It's too good to be true. This is too simple. Then I found a talk by Amber O'Hearn that she gave at Keto Fest in 2017. And she explained, bless her heart, in a way that this guitar player could understand how we came out of the trees as a species.
Yeah.
Eating meat. How we grew these big energy demanding brains because we were eating meat. Plant. We couldn't cut it with plants. We couldn't grow this bone structure with plants. And it's like I had enough pieces of the puzzle. I was like, I got to do this. Sink, swim, drown. I got to do this.
And you were still doing Atkinson's at this point.
I'm still doing Atkins as I understood it, very imperfectly, but I'm still on it. But July 16th, 2018, I started zero carb, animal protein and fats only. 10 days into it, I woke up without joint pain for the first time as an adult.
Amazing.
I'd never been diagnosed as arthritic, but, you know, by this time I'm 57. You know, I've fallen down and gone boom a few times, been broken bones. You know, I was, as a musician, playing in clubs and stuff, I was one of those that would jump up on a table to play a lead guitar solo, and sometimes the table wouldn't cooperate, and you would keep playing, protect the instrument, and, you know, you'd take the hit. And if you walked around like a question mark for a couple of weeks, it was okay. It was just part of the job. So I had aches and pains. I never thought of myself as arthritic. But I woke up and it was all gone. And I'm taking 2-mile walks in the mornings then, and I'm skipping down the sidewalk like a little kid giggling because it doesn't hurt and it feels good.
Did you think that something was wrong? Because I've dealt with pain for numerous years, and then one day I woke up and it was gone, and I thought literally something was wrong. Did that ever cross your mind, or it's going to come back kind of thing? Or you were just waiting for that moment?
I was just shocked. It wasn't what I expected. I didn't get into this to heal a bunch of physical ailment. I wasn't even aware that people were healing things like joint pain yet. I was very ignorant. I mean, I was learning. I'd found Zeroing In on Health on Facebook, and that's where I learned how to do the diet. You know, only eat when hungry. When hungry, only eat meat till you're not another bite full. Only eat the meat you crave and can't afford, and never put a sweet taste in your mouth. Those were rules I could comprehend. I could do that. That's easy.
Right.
Keto, you know, measure this, macro that, and
I didn't have all like the keto snacks and all that stuff. I mean, that just breeds more of the cravings, right?
I didn't have the processing power to manage keto.
Yeah.
So, you know, 10 days, I no joint pain. My energy's really good. And then on the 24th day, I get emotional.
That's okay.
Because it's beautiful.
Yeah.
I'm taking a walk, and it's like the switch was flipped. And all the rage, all the anger, all that fury and frustration, it just went away.
That's awesome.
And it was replaced by this waterfall of happiness and joy.
That's great.
That has not left me at all since.
That's awesome. Which is why we call you the thankful carnivore.
It's exactly why.
That's amazing.
And that's why I do these. It's not because memory lane's a good time. Because people need to understand you're not broken. You're not a genetic defect. You're not a genetic mishap. You're not an accident. You're not some freakish outlier. Oh, you're just one of those poor unfortunates the medications just don't work for. We're sorry.
That's right.
No, you were taught to eat wrong. You were taught to consume toxic nonsense that has your brain all inflamed. And if you just consume human absorbable nutrition and eliminate the toxins, don't put them in your mouth ever, you will heal.
Exactly.
And I've seen it time and time and time again. Now, my wife is a month behind me in carnivore. She healed osteoarthritis in her shoulders.
That's amazing.
And in her hands, eating this way. In addition to transforming into what she was always supposed to be anyway. I mean, you know, she's 61, I'm 59, we feel like we're 20.
That's amazing. And is it just you guys in the family, or has everybody in your family, since they've seen what you guys are going through?
Well, we have a son who lives with us. He's gone carnivore too. He's experienced some major health improvements, but I don't like to tell his story because it's his story to tell, and I'm going to let him do that. But he's really doing well with it. There's not a carb to be found in our home.
That's perfect. That's the way to do
anywhere.
So he doesn't have a choice.
No, he has a choice. He just would have had to cook. He would have had to cook it and store it and buy it and all on his own because we weren't going to.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. And so now what you do is well, first off, before we go down that road, how many days now have you been carnivore?
Today is day number 759.
That's amazing. I love that.
And there have been 0 cheat days.
That's great.
Because there is no, cheating implies gaining an advantage.
Yeah. Absolutely.
There is no advantage for me to ever consume sugar, plants, or carbs again. Because I put my sanity at immediate risk. Mm-hmm. And after what I've been through, are you serious?
Right.
There's no flavor on planet Earth worth risking my sanity over. And that's why I'm very consistent because what I'm doing works. I mean, why fool around with it?
I love that. And you do a lot of work with people, like you coach people through this stuff too. Talk a little bit about that.
I do. I'm very fortunate to be a coach at meetrx.com, Dr. Sean Baker's platform, which you just spoke at very wonderfully recently.
Thank you.
And I help people succeed. That's my goal. I'm not interested in anything else except their success, whatever, and I do because of my history. I get a lot of folks suffering from depression and anxiety, which I want to help them because I tell them all, I want you to feel at least as good as I do. And if you can feel better, wonderful. You get to feeling better than I do and teach me how.
Yeah. That's awesome. So I was going to ask you that. So you work with a lot of people that have the same kind of symptoms that you did. Do you have any other kind of, I'm just thinking if anybody's listening and they want, I really want to work with Brett. This is how I want to work with him. What other kind of experiences do you have with people going carnivore, helping them go carnivore?
Well, one of the reasons that I became an advocate for this way of eating was when I started my journey, I started talking about it on Facebook. and just amongst friends and family and whatnot. And not surprising, the response was, "You're nuts again, and
Of
this is
course.
crazy. What you're doing is very extreme. It's so terribly dangerous." They didn't believe me when I said, my depression is gone. Nobody believed me, except my wife. She could see it right up front. Repeat your question again, so I make sure I don't go off on an unnecessary tangent.
No, that's okay. I love the tangents. I go off on them myself. I just didn't know if there was other kind of symptoms that you see when you help people go carnivore.
Okay. Yeah. Other people said, yeah. And anyway, this lady saw me telling my story. She's a few years older than me, from the same area I grew up in. And she's like, "Brett, I've got primary progressive multiple sclerosis. And they're telling me that I'm going to spend most of the rest of my life in a wheelchair. This way of eating, have you heard anybody getting better?" And of course I dove in, and yes, there was testimonials, anecdotal evidence. And Kate, bless her heart, in 2 months, she fired that neurologist.
Awesome.
Because she was symptom free.
That's amazing. I love hearing that stuff.
And that's when I realized, I can't keep this a secret. I have, this is a gift I've been given, and gifts can be taken away if you don't handle them correctly. It's a belief I have. And so that's how I got into helping people, and why I started telling my story publicly the way I do. And, I've helped people with, all sorts of gut issues, because I had those gut issues. I didn't know that's what they were at the time. I thought I just, because of the depression and the meds, that's why my stomach was sour all the time, and why I was going through a gazillion pounds of antacids every day and all that kind of stuff.
Well, it's kind of like, one of the ways I look at that is, sometimes in a lot of cases, especially with some of the people that I work with, the depression is caused from that gut imbalance. So you look at yourself, as you said, if you look back knowing what you know now, it was about 15 years old when you started seeing the signs for that, right? But look at how you ate at that point in time too, right? You just said the standard American diet. And, I think that if we all kind of really dig into our childhood and the way because we all grew up, our generation did, on standard American diet. It all starts usually around, that 10, 12, 15-year-old age where you're like, you know what? I really didn't feel myself then. It's amazing how you said you're 59 and I'm 45, and this is the best we felt in our life. That's just, it should be the other way around. We should have felt our best, as teenagers. But it is powerful, like how you said, we do what we do because we know that everybody can take their health into their own hands. It's as simple as changing what you eat, and it's not our genes. And we need to start taking, I think it's just an easy road for a lot of people that, oh, my family has this, my family has that, it's okay. It's harder for people to say, oh, it's all on me. It's my fault. It's my choices. And what I pick is why the way I feel and why I have what I have. And it's really hard for people to admit that. Because that's admitting
it's very
that they have a
difficult.
fault.
and that's why I try to encourage people. I'm always trying to be encouraging, but as well as I do, sometimes you got to call it what it is. And you've got a choice.
Absolutely.
You can enjoy good health, daily happiness, which I believe takes no effort if you're not inflamed.
Exactly.
And I think that's the most profound aspect of all of this is daily happiness. That's the one thing I disagree with Dr. Peterson about. I used to agree that life was suffering, but now I don't think that's the case. I think it depends on what we're consuming. Life is always throwing challenges at us.
Yes.
But it's not always suffering if we're not consuming inflammatory garbage.
I so agree with that. And I don't know if you see this a lot with the people that you're starting to help go carnivore. As I said before, not everybody that I work with wants to go that route, which is fine. Obviously, they go to you just for that because that's what you do. But I noticed that in the beginning when they're not fully committed yet, and they go to eat something, you know, that it has a polyunsaturated fatty acid in it or a carb or sugar, that they get so moody and so emotional. And that's where I feel that a lot of those anger things probably came from with you, because you were just so highly sensitive to a lot of that stuff. You know, it's kind of hard to say if that was that particular, but I do wholeheartedly believe that was part of what was going on with you.
I agree completely. And you know, the way I felt, anxiety started in my gut. It was like in my gut and worked its way up.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that happened here first. It was always in the gut, that horrible feeling of oh crap, you know, we're in, you know, something bad. We're in trouble now. Even if I had to, very bad about self-sabotaging myself, thinking I'd done something wrong when I hadn't. Yeah, let's take on burdens. Let's just take on all the burdens we can. That's good.
Yeah.
But the absence of inflammation makes everything possible for us. We are physically at that point. If we continue with it, our bodies become what they were genetically designed to be for this time in our lives, which is phenomenal. I mean, can we talk about libido for just a minute politely?
Absolutely. We can't talk about this without talking about libido. So I think that's great for men and women.
Because it's transformed our marriage in ways we never imagined. I mean, we literally have the same libido as 20-year-olds.
That's awesome. And that's how it should be.
Exactly. Because, and that's one of the things that's so wonderful is, you know, the thought of being 80 was terrifying to me, because everybody I knew who lived that long could barely get around. They looked miserable. Mm-hmm. They didn't look like they're having any fun at anything at all, just sitting around waiting to die. Well, who wants to do that?
Exactly.
Well, now I know I don't have to.
Yeah,
I don't have to worry. I don't have to worry about whether I'm going to be ambulatory then. I just have to make sure I don't fall down and go boom and do something, have a stupid accident, and I only eat meat and drink water. I don't have anything to worry about.
Exactly. And I think that is what we have to really think about, instead of, like how you said, kind of alluded to in the beginning, is these are some of the things that we look at, these symptoms, these side effects. Oh, it's just because I'm getting older, right down to libido for men and women. Oh, it's because I've hit this age. This is, you know, or I'm postmenopausal. I'm not supposed to feel that way. That's just like all BS. It's not how it's supposed to be, you know? So we've got to stop thinking that these things are normal. It's our body talking to us, telling us that something is wrong. And it's always an inflammatory response. We just have to remove that inflammation, whatever's causing that inflammation. And then it gets better miraculously, is how they say that. So I think that's great that you are not thinking about going back. This is where you want to stay. Is this what your wife wants to as well? Is she looking at staying carnivore 100%?
Oh yeah, absolutely. She is transformed. I mean, the absence of brain fog, just that in and of itself is a priceless benefit that I couldn't, you know, it's almost impossible to describe to somebody until they've experienced it.
Oh, great.
And I've watched people's mindset change dramatically because the blinders were now gone.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, I was part of the problem all along. I had no idea. I feel, you know, that kind of realization. Because you're thinking clearly. Your brain is operating as it was designed to operate. And I mean, stop and think for a minute. How much of society's problems would be resolved in a very short period of time if we just reduce the inflammation in everybody's brain by half?
We wouldn't be having the issues that we have now. There wouldn't be any COVID. There wouldn't be any, you know, these Black Lives Matter things going on. All that would be gone.
All that rage, all that hatred. Yeah. We see time and time again with, you know, folks with addiction issues, whether it be pornography, drugs, alcohol, or whatnot, the urge, the desire, the need to do X, Y, or Z goes away.
Yeah.
It just goes, and as somebody who worked in the chemical dependency field, that's enormous. I mean, that's just unheard of. I mean, the recidivism, the failure rate for chemical dependency programs is horrible. It's like success rate of 12% or less, you know, and people pay thousands of dollars just for that tiny chance at kicking it. And all you got to do is, it's basically about sugar.
Yeah. Change what you eat. That's huge. I don't know if you're familiar with Joan Eifland.
Yes, I am.
I love her work, and with the food addiction and what it does to our brain and every center of our brain. I just absolutely adore her work. And that is something that I use a lot for my clients that don't want to go carnivore. If I could, I would put everybody on carnivore if I had my way. That's how everybody would eat. Just because I see all the profound changes in healing, just as you have. So I love that. That's all you have to do with people is just get that, because that's what I believe in. And it's hard for me, you know, to get everybody to commit to that 100%. We do a lot of more heavy meat stuff, is what I try and get them, you know, more paleo, heavier meat than most paleo. But, you know, I'm just love what Sean Baker's got going on. I love that you're a part of it. I love that I can now say that you're part of my tribe. I follow you on Instagram. I think it's amazing. Can you share with everybody where they can find you if they want to connect with you?
The best place to connect with me is on Instagram at thankful.carnivore. If you've got questions, you want to DM me, you're curious about something, I answer every question ever put to me. I'm happy to do so. You can find me on Facebook at Thankful Carnivore, although I'm not as responsive there. Twitter, it's Stickman Bleeding. That's STICKMANBLEEDIN. Don't add a G, you won't find me. Those are the best places that you can catch me. And
where do we hear your music?
Well, the website's not up right now.
Okay.
You can go to Amazon Music and iTunes, and you can hear my solo work look for Brett Lloyd, and the album is called The Last Sadness. I also have another project. It's symphonic rock with another talented singer, Victoria Horn. It's called Epiphany Rain. That music's also at iTunes and Amazon and all the digital. And then, let's see, did I say Stickman Bleeding yet?
Yeah.
That was my handle for many, many years, and it's still my solo moniker. Look for me there.
That's awesome.
And I'm working on new music now that's actually going to be fit for people to hear.
So you can put this on your website then.
Yeah. Definitely.
Okay, cool. And is there any final thoughts that you want to share with us before we sign off?
I think the biggest thing I want to convey to people, especially if they decide to try the carnivore way of eating, you have to be patient. You have to listen to your body, because we were taught to ignore what our body told us for most of our lives. Be patient, trust your body, and remember, no matter how bad things get, you've always got something to be thankful for.
Oh, that's so awesome. Brett, it was such a pleasure having you on here, sharing your story with us. And it's just I get the healing. It's very emotional. And I love that you were able to be vulnerable and share that with all of us. So thank you for coming.
Well, thank you for having me, and peace be with you, and good luck to you and all your clients. And let's teach the world how to create its own health.
I agree. Let's do it. Have a great day, everyone.